Is really a pleasure to meet you as well. And I've just heard so much about your work and read about your work and have seen your work, of course, because you have your own YouTube channel. And I love that you're using this platform and social media platforms to get the word out. Summarize, if you will. I guess I did sort of a super reducto on things for the audience, but summarize where we are and what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I was just listening to a few minutes of your show before I came on with you, and it's kind of an unfortunate but yet appropriate segue from domestic terrorism to holding a domestic terrorist accountable by denying him the ability to hold office as Section 3 of the 14th Amendment lays out. This is not, as our lawmakers have said so many times, optional. The Constitution is not optional. I've spent the past year and a half, and especially the past month, laser focused on Section 3. I covered this case, the Colorado case that went up through the Supreme Court extensively with the lawyers at Crew, Lawrence Tribe, other legal scholars. And one conclusion that they have all reached, in spite of the ruling in Trump v. Anderson, is that Donald Trump remains an adjudicated insurrectionist. This man is a domestic terrorist. He is constitutionally disqualified from holding office. And so to think that we are about to pass the Rubicon into this extra constitutional territory when our lawmakers have not only the ability, but the obligation to stop this man from assuming this office, barring a 2/3 amnesty vote, which is what Section 3 outlines, is a moment that we absolutely have to take stock of. And I have noticed in my reporting over the past month that there has not been movement. I've been trying to get people to call Congress, trying to get them to sign petitions. And I know that the appetite is not there. And that is why I came to the point with a lot of feedback from, my wonderful audience that we had to put our bodies peacefully in DC to pressure them to say, this is the moment in history when it must be done. All of the dire, horrible, awful, destructive consequences that are coming to our democracy and the free world are going to lay on your shoulders if you do not uphold your oaths in this moment.
And so, boy, there's a lot there. I mean, one of the things that's just so sad that you haven't seen anyone spark to this. Let's start with that. So anyone in an official capacity seems loath to embrace this. You think because of intimidation, both politically and sort of physical intimidation, the implied physical intimidation from MAGA?
I think that's the excuse that they're giving themselves. I think that's kind of a lame excuse, and I'm not downplaying the real threats that I know these lawmakers face. Believe me, I mean we're talking about a domestic terrorist who we have countless examples of the stochastic terrorism that he's incited across this country. I'm not downplaying that. The fact is that if we are operating from a standpoint of violence or the threats of violence precluding us from lawful action, then we've basically ceded it already. And I know one of the excuses they're giving to their constituents, because I've seen it in letters that have been sent back to them, is that we are committed to a peaceful transfer of power. Well, isn't that one hell of a straw man argument? Because this is in defense of a peaceful transfer of power, that we would object to the certification of the electoral votes of an adjudicated insurrectionist, not against it.
Yeah, isn't that wild? That is, you're right when you think about it that way. So your case seems open and shut, as you've suggested. I mean, the adjudication has happened. It happened in Colorado, the J6 committee, et cetera. And yet we're in this place where, and this was warned, it was warned of during the ramp up to the election. It seemed to me disqualifying that you could have this guy as an option. I mean, this guy who tried to overturn the U.S. government. I mean, it's with everything from a fake elector scheme to a violent takeover of the Capitol. So, this is just as a voter, I thought that way. I mean, I'm leaving aside everything else that happened in his presidency and corruption, et cetera. But sadly, it's happened. I mean, this guy said the right things and he said it the right way, and the electorate, as I think uninformed as oftentimes they are, or perhaps driven by single issues that they embrace, whatever, they elected this guy. Okay, so now we're left in this place where sort of this slow-moving catastrophe continues. And as you go to Washington, is there an organized protest that you're heading up? Give me
Yes.
a sense of what will happen.
Yes. We have a peaceful, historic protest demonstration planned for the next 3 days. So starting tomorrow, January 3rd, 4th, and 5th. It's in Washington, D.C. Please go to nowmarch.org. Nowmarch.org is our website. The movement is called 14th Now. If you're going to post this anywhere on social media, please do hashtag 14th now. And most importantly, if you can, show up with your bodies peacefully, warm bodies in this cold weather in Washington, D.C., and join us. This is, this is a tradition of civil movements to protest injustice. And I think at a lot of times in this country, we have become complacent and we take our liberty for granted. And it's going to be a very stark awakening when we realize just how unceremoniously it has been stripped from us. So right now, this precious little window of time before January 6th, we have an opportunity to stop it, and it should be stopped. It's not extreme to follow the rule of law. It's not radical to follow the rule of law. It's normal. And certifying this man's electoral votes as regularly given, which they are not. And that's what the Electoral Count Act provides for. Objecting on the basis of them being not regularly given is completely normal. And it's what every single lawmaker who has taken an oath to defend this Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic, must and should do. So please go to nowmarch.org and please join us if you can.
And we have it up there, nowmarch.org. 3 days of protests, the 3rd through the 5th. We'll double back to that also. But you mentioned the Electoral Count Act. I want to, there it is, Albert's got it on screen for you. I want to just explain what the Electoral Count Act is, because it's interesting. I mean, it's not, there is a legal mechanism, if you will, to actually get to what you're talking about.
There absolutely is. And the Electoral Count Act comes from the 1800s. It was reformed in 2022, so it's now called the Electoral Count Reform Act. That did not change the threshold for which an objection must be raised in Congress, and that is now, and it has been, 1/5 of each body. So we're looking at about 87 members of the House, which Democrats could easily comprise, and 20 members of the Senate. So 1/5 of each body must raise an objection to his electoral votes. If that objection is raised, the full body then votes on that objection, and a simple majority is required to sustain the objection. So yes, we would need some conscientious Republicans to join on to that effort, but that is all. And we know how close the margins are right now in both the House and the Senate, and they will be even when the new Congress is sworn in tomorrow. So that's all you need. You need a 1/5 to raise the objection, simple majority to sustain it. A lot of people have thought that in the event that that happened, the election would then fall to Vance. I think there is a legitimate question as to whether that would be the course that would play out, as David Schulte and Evan Davis laid out in The Hill last week. They said that if Donald Trump's electoral votes are not counted under that process that I just described, then the majority of electoral votes would fall to Kamala Harris and she would be elected president. So we should not assume that this would go to Vance. That is not anywhere laid out in black and white. There is, it appears to be, a process for it to go to Kamala Harris, being that she would be the one remaining with the electoral votes, and Donald Trump would not
right.
have this.
If you brought it below the threshold of what her vote is, then she has the most electoral college votes. It's such an interesting wrinkle, constitutionally. Has there been literally no response positively from any politician or anyone in a position of power in Congress to this?
Well, to the extent that I can speak for every single one of them, and I would not pretend to be able to do that. I haven't seen movement. I haven't seen response to my outreach to their offices personally. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and say they're all keeping their powder dry, and they need to see a public showing to be nudged to that.
That's why this showing that you're talking about, this 3 days of attention that you're trying to bring to it. That's what I love about you and this effort is that you have to make noise. I just think you have to make noise. That's what MAGA does. MAGA makes noise. They are, and Bannon's plan to flood the zone, as he calls it. He just flood the media with stories. There'll always be new news stories all the time to distract from what's actually going on.
Yep.
And so I applaud the fact that you are employing this method, that is to say, the march, the social media attention, to try to make noise of your own. I want to. So again, we have it, and we'll post it again, nowmarch.org.
Can I just put in one caveat real quick?
Please.
We have some fluid changes going on right now to our location logistics because of those terrorist events that you were talking about, because of preparations for Jimmy Carter's funeral. So if you could please make sure that you press the join the movement button at nowmarch.org so that we can update you with the latest location information in the event that there are some adjustments to that. So please click there, join the movement, so we have your email and we can send you the most precise and up-to-date location information.
That's terrific. Albert has it on screen now. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening, it's again, it's nowmarch.org. And again, there's a big join the movement button under, on the splash page. I want to go back and ask you a question, which is not one that you haven't been asked before, but I've never asked it to you. So I'm what brought you into the campaign of Donald Trump to begin with?
8 years of mental malpractice on a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week basis. I wasn't up all those hours, but a lot of them from Fox News. Constant brainwashing, total up is down, inverted propaganda as to the reality of the situation in our country. And I thought, quite tragically, that our democracy was at an existential point in 2016. And that if we didn't stop Hillary Clinton, that our freedoms would be out the window and we'd become a communist third world country. And, I bought into this fear mongering, this constant propaganda. And I'm an educated person, Mark. I graduated at the top of my class with 2 degrees. And people just need to understand that the hypnosis of this mental malpractice can work on anyone. It can work on the best of us. And it presents a completely inverted picture of reality that motivates people to work against their own interests.
It's interesting because you're right. It's not nothing that you're this, very big brained person, and you, after an inundation from Fox News, became radicalized in a way. I mean, that may be an overstatement, but I mean, you certainly swept up in the notion that democracy was on the line. And it's funny, the left was being told democracy was on the line, and the right was being told democracy on the line. It was on the line in different ways. And I feel as though maybe this is because I lean left, that, that there was some truth to the fact that democracy was on the line if you voted in Trump. And I think we saw evidence of that. But it's a cult. And there is a cultism around that Fox News blast of disinformation. I think it's really instructive that you were swept up in it.
Yeah, it's criminal what they've done to this country. Absolutely criminal, Mark.
Free Soul says, love your story, Jess. So glad you woke up from the cult. So that was the next question I was going to ask you, which is, when did you wake up from it all?
It was gradual. I mean, I describe this awakening in kind of 2 parts. So there was the legal awakening, and that happened in late 2017 when my statute of limitations was running out to sue them. And I had, we don't have to go through my story now, but I basically.
But when you say sue them, it was over the NDA?
No, it was first over hostile workplace and defamation. I mean, my character was completely slandered during that campaign by very malicious people, the same sorts of people that are going to be following him into the White House right now. But I lived with this under a dark cloud for about a year and did not want to sue, wanted to walk away. And I had this kind of existential crisis in the end of 2017 and realized I needed to sue. Now, that was the moral awakening. That was the moral awakening to something was deeply wrong in this campaign. I can't walk away from this doing nothing. I can't live with myself. I can't ever stand for anything in my life if I don't sue over the situation. It was not linked at that point to an awakening about Donald Trump, the man, partially because I had relatively decent interactions with him when I was having horrific interactions with other campaign staffers on a senior level. So that took about another 3 to 4 months, maybe 5. I would say by early 2018, I was fully out. And it was just kind of like transitioning my news sources, seeing the disgusting manner in which he treated public servants, whether it was James Comey not getting his plane ride home when he was fired, Andrew McCabe being denied his retirement when the Marie Yovanovitch thing came around. She's going to go through some things that related to me in unbelievable ways. So just seeing from the top down, seeing that the rot actually came from Donald Trump, the man. This is one thing that a lot of MAGA believes. When all these other people get thrown under the bus, they're like, oh, it's just the other people. They never connect it to Trump. So there was a cognitive disconnect there because of some of my own personal experiences. And it took just seeing all of the other horrors that other people were going through to make the connection. And then, when I was out, it was a complete 180.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, that you saw the way that others in the organization or in the orbit of Trump, you saw the way that others were being harassed, destroyed, and rotisseried by this horror that was the Trump administration. I mean, they went after, people who've served this country quite nobly, and they went after them and destroyed their lives. I mean, their inability to serve this country further, their inability to get pensions. They disqualified from government service just prior to the moment that their pension was going to kick in, et cetera. So it's interesting that you saw that and you thought, wait a minute, that is now resonating with me because I'm living a version of that.
Right.
As a Trump campaign staffer. So you, it's asked, were you surprised that Trump won, or did you see it coming, is what is being asked?
Well, if you watch Lights On, you know that I left the network that I was on because they didn't want to cover election anomalies. And I think that it is absolutely unforgivable that we didn't, at a minimum, do recounts in swing states in this election. The fact that we had hundreds, I know the numbers was initially dozens, I think it's hundreds of bomb threats on election day to Democratic precincts from Russia. We had security experts telling us that election deniers from 2020 had access to the software that was used in this election. They were simply asking for election hygiene. I am not confident, and I don't think this makes me a conspiracy theorist, that Donald Trump won this election freely and fairly. So I'll put that out there first. To the extent that he did get the support that he did, and we know that he still got millions of votes, by the way, which are still less than a third of voting eligible adults, even by taking the numbers at face value. So let's just keep that in perspective. It's less than a third of voting eligible adults. According to the numbers.
Your point is, if you I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just going to underscore it. You're saying if you in any way draw from this election, even if you presume that it's legit, which I think is a pretty significant presumption, I'm kind of in your camp, you can't somehow suggest that there's a mandate.
No, not even a majority, not even close to a majority. Yeah. So but to the extent that millions did vote for him, which they did, it is what we were talking about 5 minutes ago. It is the propaganda. It is the hypnosis, the mental malpractice, aided this time by a billionaire who bought his own platform, and still constant inundation from Russian propaganda, which in this case, in this country, is basically just Fox News. So, so many forces were injected. Romania had the guts to throw out an election that was tampered with by Russian interference. We just take it at face value that that's our media landscape, and that's what we're dealing with.
So you discuss all of this on the podcast, and I know the podcast has become very popular, and I'm presuming that on some level, even though there seems to be, this is sort of a cry in the darkness, it would seem, we've made the same kind of cries here. From time to time about this election, its legitimacy, questions surrounding it, the really we've wondered aloud and continue to wonder why there wasn't a call for a paper recount on and any of these swing states. You know, these are critical elections. The threat is real. All we heard about was the threat of a Donald Trump presidency, but apparently it's not a real enough threat for anyone on the Democratic side to call for a recount. There's a level of insanity to that.
Insane. And I just want to like I mean, your viewers know this, my viewers know this. People are so disengaged right now. They are so feel completely let down by Democratic leaders who are telling us, I mean, believe me, I promoted the hell out of Kamala Harris in spite of some real qualms I had, in particular with the policy in the Middle East. I mean, this is unforgivable what's going on right there right now. But I promoted the hell out of her because I understood that our choice was binary. And she went out on the trail and said, this man cannot, someone who said they want to terminate the Constitution cannot take an oath to it again. She said, hard work is good work. Where is that hard work? Where is that spine and that fight from these people, as you said, who have been so unambiguous up until November 5th? And I just want to put this out there. And, you know, so many people in my group that have put together 14th Now have this sentiment, like, we're not going to be there for you next time you need us. And I don't even have to speak for myself. I'm speaking for the masses. You have completely lost people. And they are looking for that fight peacefully, of course, a million times peacefully. They are looking for that leadership, and they will get behind it. But you damn well better show it, and you better show it now because you're running out of time.
Yeah, it's disheartening in the extreme to see that there's so little fight to the Democrats. It was really, I mean, I understand they feel, many of them, as though it was a legitimate election and they got thumped. And so they don't want to go over the ashes of that thumping. Although, let's face it, the weeks following the election were populated with nothing but podcasts from high-profile Democrats and Democratic strategists talking about what they could have done differently, what they could, the messaging problem, running the campaign of joy, all of this kind of thing. So on some level, they are going through the ashes, but it seems as though they're overlooking one huge element here, which is that there might have been some real questions as to the election's legitimacy.
100%. And if you just think about that, Mark, you think about how Republicans and MAGA, their number one MO is projection, right? And they did this massive, I mean, comical, totally out of bounds show in 2020 about a stolen election, right? It was so exaggerated that it got to the point of a deadly insurrection on our Capitol. They so stained the conversation about election integrity and election security that we can never have a legitimate conversation about it again. Think about how dangerous that is. And that's where Democrats have allowed themselves to land, to be so gaslit by that they cannot even have a conversation. Extremely dangerous.
Great take, because that's exactly what's going on. You can just see it. They don't want to be like them. And so we're not going to be like they are. We're going to hand over the reins of power. We're not going to say that the election was illegitimate. Guys, if it was illegitimate, you have to call it out as such. I mean, it's so strange how we have moved into this world which has turned everything on its side and made this kind of given it a radioactivity, so they just don't want to go near it. It's utterly crazy. I want to get back, though, quickly to nowmarch.org. Nowmarch.org is the way in which you can get information. Those of you who are in and around Washington, D.C., I myself am from Washington. I know that there are viewers of the show who live, in Northern Virginia, in Southern Maryland, and in the district. I encourage you to support Jessica in this effort. It is nowmarch.org. And again, you'll go to nowmarch.org and then you'll click Join the Movement. And that'll be an effort to coordinate information, and I'm sure support in every way imaginable. And I really applaud you. I think this is a courageous thing. I'm sure you're gonna get heat. And the more successful you are, the more heat you're going to get. So in a way, the heat is a sign of your success. But I think it takes great courage, especially since you worked through the whole legal harangue associated with your NDA. I mean, you're really somebody who is, this is like Shawshank Redemption. You finally made it out of the prison, and you've, really seen clearly the situation, and now you are going back to try to bring attention to this incredibly important subject. And I'm hoping that it makes a dent. And I want to be clear as I wrap up here. I don't think you feel, but I'll let you tell me, as though this inauguration can really be derailed, as though it does appear that there is no support. But, and this is why I love what you're doing so much, the noise has to be made, and you're making the noise. You are pointing to this, and it's important. And I think history will really show you so favorably as having done this. But to be clear, you feel as though attention has to be drawn to this from concerned Americans, as opposed to a real ability to derail this inauguration.
Listen, Mark, I, unlike some people on this platform and others, do not pretend to be God. I am not God, but I do believe in God. I know that many people told me when I sued to invalidate that NDA 6-7 years ago that it could never happen. It was impossible. And the trajectory of my legal case was divine. You could have never planned it that way, never strategized it legally. I have no idea what is going to happen on January 20th, but I do know that one thing that I hear in this context, and so many, is people always say, we'll see what happens. We are what happens. We are what happens. So I don't want to put any kind of prediction on what will or will not happen on January 20th. All I know is that it matters what we are doing right now. And so I'm 100% focused on that action.
Well, like so many leaders of so many movements through time, that's the right answer. I go back to the Vietnam War protesters. Did they really think they were going to end the war? Maybe not with one protest, but with enough noise. The war did end, and it was largely the result of people making noise. And so leaders of movements have to believe, and I love that you do believe. I love that you've brought this muscle to this effort. And again, the effort is played out at nowmarch.org and also through her podcast, the Lights On podcast. I encourage people to check that out as well. But again, to be part of the movement, to stay connected to the movement, go to nowmarch.org and hit join the movement. I'm a fan. I'm so glad that you came on, and I'm delighted by what you're doing. I know it's a heavy lift, but I want you to know you have friends here on this show, so please come back and update us.
Thank you so much, Mark. I've mentioned your show on my show several times. I'm really, really grateful to be here. So grateful that you're shining a light on what we're doing. I really appreciate it. By the way, you're looking right now at the audio podcast, which is not currently live since I left Midas Touch. So the only way to find Lights On right now is to go to my YouTube channel, Jessica Denson, just FYI.
We love our YouTube.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Go there, find it. Lights On with Jessica Denson on YouTube. Thanks, Jessica. Good luck.
Thank you, Mark.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Stay in touch. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.